Welcome, everyone. I know that oftentimes people feel like compliance is a necessary evil, but what if it could actually boost your growth? Today's webinar, we're debunking compliance myths and showing how smart practices can drive revenue growth. I'm excited to have security experts Paige Hanson from SecureLabs and Brian Bero from Opsbook with us, sharing their insights on using tools like tabletop exercises to ace audits and uncover hidden opportunities. Today, we're going to learn how operational exercises can be surprisingly impactful. We're going to discover how to streamline evidence management with SecureLabs and test your response plan with Opsbook. We want to inspire you with some success stories and make this an interactive session where we will share insights, have a live demo, and answer questions to your compliance questions. That was easier for me to think than to say. Okay. To get us started today, I'd like to introduce you to our two speakers and really the hosts of today's event. First off, I'd like to introduce you to Brian Bero. He is the founder and CEO of Opsbook. Opsbook is a cybersecurity software company that enables customers to define, conduct, and review risk-based scenarios through tabletop exercises. He's a seasoned compliance expert with over 2 decades of experience transforming audit processes. He's also quietly a serial entrepreneur who founded Gray Twist and Modest Spark and co-founded Strike, Graph, and Aptio, which ultimately was acquired by IBM. He's helped countless organizations turn compliance challenges into strategic advantages, unlocking hidden revenue streams and boosting operational excellence. Joining him today, I'd also like you all to say hello to Paige Hanson, the co-founder and head of communications and partnerships at SecureLabs. It's a compliance as a service offering, helping businesses navigate the complexity of regulations like SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and so many more. Paige is a certified identity theft risk management specialist and worked with the FBI and has impacted over 17,000 law enforcement officials. Why is that important? Because her diverse experience offers a 360-degree view of risk that makes her a sought-after speaker, and she has been transforming compliance into a powerful tool for business growth. Thank you so much for inviting me to have this conversation with you and navigate through this topic, which is so important for every business owner.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be here, Lisa.
Brian, so part of what we talked about, and I promised our audience, is that we're going to do a little bit of a demo so that we can set a context for our conversation. Brian, will you show us what Opsbook is and take us through a little bit about the power of the tool? Tool is underselling it, the platform that you've developed.
Happy to do so. Just bear with me. We'll pull this up. All right, we'll walk through this, and I'm not going to give you every feature, function, capability, but let's talk about how our customers are leveraging Opsbook to really, what we feel, help enable and help perform critical exercises within their own organization. At our core, Opsbook, we are an operational exercise management platform. Sounds really grandiose, but the way to think about it is practicing. Inevitably things do happen in your environment. You have to be prepared for different risks that could occur to your business. Opsbook gives you kind of the platform or the medium to be able to have and really facilitate efficiently discussion-based exercises. So let's just kind of dive in. What really Opsbook can do for an organization is help them define exercises, define scenarios based on the risks to their environment, and be able to then manage those in the form of exercises. So, for example, I could be really any B2B company out there. It doesn't necessarily have to be industry specific or large company, small company, everywhere in between. There's certainly a risk to my businesses out there, and I want to be prepared for those challenges. A lot of times those risks and a lot of times those exercises that we need to be prepared for, they can range the spectrum from business continuity. They can range certainly for incident response. Also crisis management. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. But you need to be prepared for those things. With Opsbook, you can come in and you can actually define or build out those, what we call exercises. And that's pretty easy to manage in our platform. We have a vast library that you could start from, or just adding scenarios, pretty basic. So in other words, I could come in, I might have a new risk to the business. Maybe I read a headline out there that says, hey, there's this type of data breach and here's how it occurs. I can actually model or build that within Opsbook within minutes. I don't have to wait. I don't have to kind of like plan or just say, hope that doesn't happen to me. I can actually build that and have that managed inside of my environment. Now, when I have that managed inside of my environment, I can have that scheduled. I can say, hey, I want my team to run this on a periodic basis, monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, annual, whatever that might be. And the system is going to automatically build out your calendar, kind of let you know when you need to conduct these exercises. And then when you're ready to conduct those exercises, you can actually use our portal to be able to run those exercises. Just give you a real quick walkthrough of what one of those might look like. We'll pick an incident response, a critical data breach. Hopefully this doesn't happen to you. But from a data breach perspective, if you want to be prepared for this type of event, you use a platform like us to be able to come in and say, I want to run this exercise. You can conduct it within our platform. And tabletop exercises, again, traditionally, they've been very discussion-based. We're not removing that. We want to help enable facilitators and enable that discussion to actually occur. But we want to bring a little bit of technology to help make that a lot easier. Certainly do, the adding of participants, bringing people and inviting them to the discussion, make that really, really simple. The product kind of handles all the scheduling aspect of it, handles the content, and also just handles the management of the actual exercise. So in this case, starting one of these exercises, I can come in and I can basically, start walking through and just really engaging my own team, around what would we do if there was a data breach exercise. So we do some, overview of what that might look like. We can kind of model that out. We can assign roles. We can sort of, as we navigate through this, we can review our incident response plan and how we might do that. We start taking actions within this. Maybe we flag the fact that, like HR has never seen the IR plan. This has actually happened a few times before, where people are, going, gosh, I've never actually looked at the plan. So you might come in and as you're walking through these discussions, the cool thing about a discussion is it might take you in different areas. It might uncover gaps. It might, identify opportunities. System like Opsbook allows you to capture that information and say, hey, I identified a gap, flag that for further review down the line, and then kind of move on with it. Interest of time, we won't walk through the entire tabletop discussion, but a product like this enables, again, that organization to really have a great structured discussion, capture all of whether they're action items, their gaps, analysis, actions, process, pulls it all into one spot instead of it just kind of being a good discussion and then there's no leave behind, or everyone's got their notes and they just sort of disappear out the door. We capture it in one centralized place. And when it's finished, we have the ability to go and generate an after action report. So take all that information that was captured by the facilitator, by the participants, bring that together in an after action report, modify it if we need to, publish it. And when it's published, now if I'm an organization and I'm going for, let's say, a SOC 2 audit, ISO audit, HIPAA, a lot of these like regulatory requirements, this after action report captures what happened during the tabletop, who participated in the tabletop, and really the structure of the exercise itself that you can use as evidential, is basically evidence for those audits. And that's published out to the portal. So whether it's internal auditors, external auditors, or just the team itself, you've got that captured, and you can follow up on those action items, close those gaps. And it's a little bit of a self-feeding machine over time where, you get better, you practice, you identify opportunities, and then you get better and you practice it again, and it just gets easier and easier.
That's a fabulous demonstration and a platform that has so much impact. I mean, from a cybersecurity perspective and being prepared for that, but in all aspects of business, there's an application for tabletop exercises, and having a platform where whether it's, IT related or if it's operational in nature, right? Your recovery from an accounting perspective, and operationally, right? Having that level of a repository is truly a game changer for businesses. Because in the old school, the way I facilitate with my clients, right? You're in a big room, and at the end of it, we have sticky notes stuck across walls and walls and walls and walls. And somehow that gets translated into something. And that takes days and sometimes weeks. With this system, it's done in real time. And at the end of it, it is accessible to everybody who was in the room and everybody who wasn't. That's appropriate. Paige, I know with SecureLabs, you have started and gone to market with Opsbook in partnership. But start with us a little bit in what is SecureLabs and what is compliance as a service?
Yes. So compliance as a service means audit readiness, and SecureLabs will help not only prepare you for the audit, but work with you and your company during that kind of whole audit process. It's very important to be kind of audit ready. I feel like a lot of times people think, oh, it's just this moment in time that we have to have all of our ducks in a row. But what we're seeing with the number of data breaches that are out there, or surprise audits that happen, or maybe you have a new upstream partner that is going to require some sort of certification or look into your policies. It is really great to use a platform and have an auditable process. So alongside our preparation offering, we have the platform that helps then put it all in one place. So it's not a folder here, a folder here. Oh, the owner of this, it lives in this different department. So it makes it very easy to find said policies as well.
And so that platform, right, the idea of that is so interesting. When I start work with clients in a generic consulting kind of conversation, one of the first questions I always ask is, do you know where your policies, processes, and procedures are? Do you know when you last touched them, modified them, reviewed them? The expected typical answer is the last time we were audited.
Right.
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 There we go.
Right.
And eyes roll, there are grunts, there's groans, and oh my gosh. And then my follow-up to that is, if you know you have an audit in July, when do you start preparing for that audit? Depending on the size of the company, right? It could be a month ahead of it. It could be 90 days ahead of it. It could be 6 months ahead of it, because they have to go to all of those owners and all of those things and all of the nooks and the crannies, and they're not even sure that they're going to find everything that they're supposed to have. So SecureLabs is an answer to that.
Yes. I mean, you touched on two different things. You've got all hands on deck. It's kind of that fire drill, and everyone else has different responsibilities at work. So it's, they're taking away time from, they're running their business and doing what they need to do within their role. And so, staying updated on that and having a repository where and documented when it was last updated, that certainly helps speed things along. On the other side of things, there are, in the organization, if you're just not sure, oftentimes they're not sure what is required. So then you're like, are these policies enough? I'm not sure. I think it's enough. I mean, we haven't been breached or we haven't had a problem before, but also then relying on the expertise to know, is this required? Do we need this program? Do we need this certification? And that's also helpful as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, and this is the reason that I think it's a great partnership. We share a very similar philosophy. I think, when I first started, background in software development, and I had exposed to capital markets as an industry and also the Department of Defense. And you never thought of, audits were happening and compliance was happening, but it wasn't an event. Like, you weren't practicing for the event. I think the best analogy is it's like sports. Like, baseball player, softball player, I'm going for a tournament. I don't just start practicing in preparation for that tournament. I continuously practice to keep sharp. Now, I might put in a little extra effort, right prior to that tournament. I think it's very similar. I think, unfortunately, compliance and auditing has gotten this name of hurry up, all hands on deck. We prepare for this, and then when we're on the other side of it, we celebrate. And you should. These are big events that occur. But you have to have this discipline and this sort of mindset of, compliance is a part of what I do. I don't need to over prepare for it. I don't need to spend every waking second for it, but I can't just put it on the shelf and just get ready for it, 30 days ahead of time. That's why we like working with SecureLabs. They have that mind. They work with their clients the same way that we work with our clients, which is let's instill this culture of compliance without it just being massive overhead. Or would you try to put a little of the fun into compliance and security?
It can be fun.
Yeah, it can.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, right? Because what we're talking about, right? I staged us with the old school mindset, that annual kind of experience, which is a myth that you both with your products are breaking, right? Audit readiness should be daily. It shouldn't be something that you have to plan for. It should be something that's built into the operational culture of any business, that these things are just taken care of. Leveraging the platforms helps make that easier, right? And we have all of that, but right, the paperwork behind it can be a pain. And Paige, would you kind of tell us a story, take us through a client experience where you've used both your platform, SecureLabs, and Opsbook, and what that did for that client experience?
Certainly. When you were showing the platform and you talked about you're walking through the process. We recently did and conducted a tabletop exercise with our SOC 2 client who needed the documentation of going through an incident response plan. So we had the documentation. Walking through that with the client, we're helping them gather all the different pieces for their SOC 2 audit. Okay, yes, that's great. But for this piece, it always has been one of those things when we're preparing for a tabletop exercise, and Lisa, this is your bread and butter. Where there's all this preparation up front, and then the after action report can take weeks, or days, if not weeks. So this particular one, they had a very robust incident response. It's 17, 20 pages, and it covered a lot of things. But as we walked through the whole process of what happens if there is an incident response, and oh, by the way, we're taking out your CTO. They don't get to comment on this. Do you know what to do as an organization? Is it the first time you're seeing this policy or this action plan? Usually it's yes. So the fact that they actually got to go through it together, even though they had developed it together the previous year, things like, okay, we have a comms plan, but who is the actual person that decides between the partner comms and the internal communication comms and all that stuff? Or we do have a identity theft protection set up, but what happens when we call them? Is this a 24-hour turnaround? Is this a 72-hour turnaround? I mean, you're asking those sort of questions, and they were able to even take their incident response plan to just a whole nother level because they knew the turnaround times and what was required via state. So that is my, just my most recent example anyway of kind of how we've gone through the process of not only just documentation, everything from a SOC 2 compliance portion, but use the tool from Opsbook that really allowed us to be not only efficient. This is a 1 hour exercise. This wasn't a full day, sit down, 1 hour exercise, had the after action report within, the next day to them. And it was very thorough. So it was fantastic.
Oh, I love to hear that. I mean, we've done our job if we're enabling facilitators to engage their clients or their participants, right? It could be in their own organization, and you identify a gap or two. And the kind of way you just described it, I'd love to kind of hear a little bit, put you on the spot. Was it a fun exercise? Did it feel like a gotcha exercise, or did it feel a little more like, oh, wow, we come out the other side and our eyes are a little bit more open, and if this was to happen, we're prepared for it?
I would say exactly. You nailed it, Brian. It was really a, wow, this one, one person did say, I was dreading this meeting. And I ended up, this is very valuable. And it was one of those, we should probably do this again. We don't have to wait a year. We should do this with our other plans. And absolutely, we can do that. Even though it's not required for your SOC 2 audit, we can absolutely do this. So 100% learned. And from a facilitator standpoint, it made it that joy. I hate to compare, enjoyable and stuff, but it really wasn't. It wasn't bad. It was actually really cool to see them come out with action to really enhance their process.
Oh, that's so great to hear. That's a little bit of why we got into this. It's so funny. It's like for a lot of people, tabletop is discussion, right? A policy review, it's a discussion. And a lot of times people dread the discussion because it might identify some action items, some things to do, just put you a little unease, right? But if we can kind of help people maybe like de-stress that a little bit, I think the more discussion that happens in any organization, put Opsbook aside, the better, right? And an incident, think about incidents or crisis that happens. A lot of times those are, you're kind of sometimes in a larger organization, you might be meeting somebody in another department on not the worst day of your life, but certainly not a good day from a company perspective. And I think discussion helps maybe build a little bit of a bridge, and a tabletop in particular is an exercise that can help do that.
I want to just clarify, because I agree, Brian, that the conversations are important and that the discussion when you're doing a policy review is very reactive, reactionary, and one-sided, right? Somebody's talking, but a tabletop exercise is an interactive opportunity. And when you do it and design it well, you are bringing in stakeholders from across functions in a way that they probably don't when they do the policy review. Those HR departments get missed and your key players get overlooked. But when you actually walk through a scenario, it's hands-on learning. And that is a game changer for that experience inside of that business because it is real. Years ago, a client that I worked with did annual disaster recovery planning and actually had built out it was a financial institution and had a mini branch in the basement to run these exercises. And the reality, when you start going through step by step, what does the day look like after a catastrophe? That conversation is so much different than reading and reviewing the policy documentation, which more often than not, depending on the size of the company, was built by an external resource, delivered to them and put on a shelf or filed away on the file share somewhere, only to be looked at once a year. So taking this and making it operationally real and having the team, Paige, I love the fact that they said, we can do this more often. We can do this in other places, right? That is a paradigm shift getting ready to happen. And that is taking compliance away from being boring and actually becoming a continuous improvement based business.
Right. I mean, just to kind of piggyback on that, oftentimes compliance is just seen as a cost center, and it's something you have to do when, the part of this, the talking points that we wanted during this webinar is to say it can actually boost your revenue. And so knowing that you've got all your ducks in a row and you know what to do, there's so much opportunity in there when what regulations that there are coming down the pipeline, especially when you're developing product. If you know and you're squared away with the certain requirements that are going to be asked of you, doesn't that just streamline things a little bit better when you're developing as a company? So compliance plays a crucial role in that, in the growth of your company.
Yeah, I would agree. It unlocks doors for sure. And I think, some of my first forays, in entrepreneurship, trying to sell, it used to be a Fortune 500 problem. Like if I'm selling into the Fortune 5, I better get compliant, right? I'm a software company, I'm selling into them, and whatever it might be, SOC, ISO, or their own particular standards. But as I think we've all seen, it went from Fortune 500 to Fortune 1000 to Global 3000. Now it's everybody's problem. So like to be able to open those doors and really instill trust with clients and be able to open up new markets, new opportunities. Compliance isn't something, again, you sort of do off to the side, you're one and done. You got to be proactive about it. And it really does require, it's not a technology problem. It's not just a sort of a policy, compliance or risk officer problem. It's a company. I wouldn't say problem, it's a company opportunity because the company's trying to open up new doors, new revenues, new markets, new industries, and things like that. That brings on risk to the business. In turn, you've got to respond to that risk. So that's why I think, the teams that we work with on a day-to-day basis, when they have that sort of thought about like, well, we can use this to not just get better for today, but to be a little more proactive based on where the business wants to take us from a revenue opportunity standpoint, it can really help. You can definitely respond a lot faster.
And if the business has this mindset ingrained in, right, and we've started to build that culture, how can they take the information and the data that they're getting in the systems and use it as truly a competitive advantage? How can they differentiate themselves based on what they're learning with Opsbook and SecureLabs?
I can start maybe from an
Yes.
Opsbook perspective. There's sort of the react. I don't want to say react. There's controls that you've already got in place. You're exercising those things. You identify gaps. You sort of refine. But these exercises and sort of the data that comes out of it can be a little bit more what if. Like, what if we went into this area? What if we went into this particular market and we had to do certain things? What controls might we need to put in place to respond? So like the information coming out of Opsbook can definitely be used for, I would say, the here and now. It could be used to generate run books and procedural playbooks to help respond to events, but it can also be there to help, influence policy, to basically give business a little bit of a heads up that, hey, if we go into this particular market, we might need to add these couple of controls, and those controls mean more headcount, more systems, more things like that. So it kind of gives you a little bit of visibility, if you will, into like what's ahead, and potentially insight into not just, hey, budget for people, budget for systems, but here's the process areas that we would need to really sort of iron out ahead of time. So you kind of go in a little eyes wide open, whereas, and again, I may be speaking from some startups where we didn't do something like that. We would leap first and then clean up the carnage a little bit later, which probably not the best approach, hindsight. Something like Opsbook would have at least given us some way to look ahead just a little bit from a compliance and from a team and department perspective.
Well, and Brian, I want to stick with you for a minute on this because you have a fascinating background where you've been in startup land, right, as an entrepreneur, founder, co-founder, but your career started out in DoD land, right? Two very different cultures, mindsets, and the idea that we can actually begin with this in mind and grow already being audit aware, audit ready, and positioned to be compliant is not the traditional mindset of your average founder.
No, and kind of lucked out a little bit, not by design, but that DoD experience was working on military simulators. So my customer was, somebody from the Army, somebody from the Air Force, somebody from the Navy, and they were doing joint exercises, and they were doing them for live. But the reason that they were working on simulators was before they went to Camp Pendleton and literally started blowing things up. They could try this out. They could test it out. Like, I have a theory. I think we want to do this, and I think we want to do that. I got to get prepped for it. So building systems to enable them to look at the results, after action reports. So it's ironic, I'm coming a little full circle in my career with it, but I saw the value of, hey, that after action report, this worked, this didn't work, I can fine tune it. And obviously when they go on the battlefield, all bets are off, right? But at least there's some confidence. I've tried this out. I've tried a couple of different scenarios and I feel prepared. And if you're prepared, you're confident. If you're confident, you're going to perform. You're going to perform better. So that sort of mindset is definitely carried with me throughout my career, but very much at the core of Opsbook.
And Opsbook is positioned to serve a client base that is a growing, emerging business. You are not selling to the Fortune 500, the Fortune 5, right? We can use this tool as soon as we have a company. It is there to support from the beginning. And so, done right the first time and improved along the journey is always easier than retrofitting and slamming it in year 5.
That's correct.
All right, Paige, from the SecureLabs perspective, what is it that the audit readiness gives your clients in terms of strategic advantage?
One big thing is they're using it as a marketing tool. So as Brian and both you alluded to, it's no longer just a Fortune 500 company that has to be compliant. Now, if you're the little guy and you want to work with upstream, you too need to have some sort of whatever the certification is within your industry. We're getting a lot of requests around SOC 2 right now, and we have a handful of clients that are saying, you know what, we're actually find that it differentiates us between our competitor, that we can say, we have this SOC 2 attestation report. We take our customers and et cetera's data seriously. And so they're now using that as a marketing tool for that. And I think that's great. And that's where it's all going, is customers and business opportunities want to understand and know that your business is taking cybersecurity and the protection of data seriously, because we don't want to be part of the news story. Your company be part of a news story of the recent breach, and then all of a sudden now your reputation is down the drain. So we certainly don't want that.
One of the themes that you were talking about earlier, and the idea of audit readiness. 6 or 8 years ago now, I was working with a large client, and they had the aspiration of being audit ready daily on their procure to pay sort of business back office processes. They were a large organization who on an annual basis had to pay the external third-party consultant to do the pre-audit before the real audit. And right there's the aspiration of, it is possible to get rid of that one piece. If we have the right controls in place, we can prove them, we can exercise them, we can do everything else that's involved. In that process 8 years ago, we never got to audit ready on a daily basis because of all the manual processes, all of the controls that were manual, not automated. SecureLabs is playing in a space where that aspiration is real now.
Absolutely, it's real. It is 100% real. And the fact that, yes, you can automate a lot of this, where access logs is a big big piece of that. And you can automate that piece of it. You still need, you definitely still need a human for a lot of, you can't just ask AI for a policy. To your point earlier, this policy that's the template. You do need to make sure that it's part of your organization and things that you do. And I know it helps when you have Opsbook to walk through some of those, from a tabletop exercise point of view. But it absolutely speeds it up and can make the reality of an audit ready daily a real thing.
Yeah. And I would just add on, prior to Opsbook, I came from the audit prep space and saw the emergence of like continuous control monitoring. And it's kind of going through a couple of different names, but essentially a continuous audit. And I love that approach. And that's why I think it's such a good synergy. I'll try to avoid using that term, but I'll use it nevertheless. You want something like that. You want automation, like you want a SecureLabs to come in and you've look time, money, effort into controls. And if you have the ability to automate a lot of the, make sure that you're ready on a daily basis, right? So your security posture never really lapses, right? It's not like audit and then you sort of decay and then you come back up and you're good. And then, rinse, repeat, which has been traditionally the cycle. SecureLabs helps kind of break that. And you're always sort of audit ready. But you can't automate everything. And Paige, what you're saying there is, there's policies, that's where something, and again, it's a small part of it, but discussion based, having people kind of thinking and being aware and being able to sort of use a tool like Opsbook to maybe facilitate the other side of it, which is more, what if we did this? What if we did that? What if something really did happen? Will those controls functionally work across departments? It's good. It's a good combination between the two companies to have something like that in your tool chest for any organization, large, small, that's growing up, sort of growing up quickly. This gives you a really good solid foundation to build off of.
It absolutely does. And it turns a paradigm upside down and backwards, right? This approach that what both SecureLabs and Opsbook is coming to market with is a change in mindset, right? We talked about that paradigm shift, but it is very much about being disruptive in your own space to drive your innovation. And with the tools that you've built, you have the opportunity to test. Who would have ever said that in a compliance mindset, we're going to what if into the future? Right? Brian, you were talking about that earlier, and I went, this is one of the best conversations I've ever had, because we've just taken one of the most dry topics for most companies and turned it into an opportunity to imagine possibility for the future. As we talk through the things that both of these tools and these systems give their clients in terms of information and actionable knowledge, we're also giving them the opportunity for cost savings. It takes fewer humans to run around and find all of the stacks of paper. It takes fewer humans to write the policies and the processes and procedures. We have the tools to support that. Those dollars can be reinvested into the business in other places. So we talked about compliance as a revenue driver. It's also potentially, an overhead reduction opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I saw a little bit of this movie at Aptio, but it was in the office of the CIO. So a little bit different, right? Not security specific, but how do you drive, efficiency in your IT department? And yeah, you can take cost out of the business, but I always like to say it was more instead of your high value, employees and partners working on maybe menial stuff, policy creation, give them more time to do analytics, give them more time to do what ifs, give them more time to be experts in the field instead of starting with a blank canvas, writing out an after action report, highlighting gaps and care and feeding of other systems. Let SecureLabs, let an Opsbook, let us automate a lot of it. Let us do some of that generation, and then let your experts kind of do what experts typically do. So therefore, you might not need to go hire another 10, 20 people to do sort of the menial aspects of it. But that's the operational efficiency that you can get out of your compliance and risk department. And then really, kind of turbocharge what those departments, and they tend to be federated departments, right? Like everyone's sort of in those things, but really enable them to be way, way, way more efficient long term.
Come on, Brian. You mean you don't want a group of 10 people in a conference room for a week, combing over every single policy and
yeah, I mean, how many roles have you heard? I've talked to a few CISOs. It's like, I thought I was going to do the cool stuff, and then I'm coming in and I'm just, typing up a policy or cutting and pasting. I've heard that quite a bit, and you're
right.
Like, oh, maybe we can help out with that.
Right.
Well, so let's talk a little bit more around that, right? Compliance stifles innovation is a common misconception. We've talked a little bit about the what if-ing, the opportunity in this, but Paige, from your perspective, how does compliance actually enable innovation?
Well, one, you can make better decisions with that data that you have. So, whether you're, the insights into your business, you also know from regulations, I had mentioned that earlier, it's just that it allows you to really innovate, knowing kind of the guardrails and then what you can kind of go up against, because the worst thing is, putting a bunch of money into developing a certain product when it's going to be, heavily fined or, something's going wrong with how you're developing it. If you could have, whether it's consumer safety in mind or from a data, even just protection standpoint in mind, that then speeds up the roadmap for that as well.
Yeah, it's a subtle shift. And again, I sort of lucked out with whether it was DoD or even capital markets, right? Capital markets, you have SEC regulations coming in, and you start with that as a software developer. Like compliance and the requirements, they weren't a burden; they were just a known. So they gave me that's the canvas that I have to operate on. So I could focus on the innovation side of the business because I kind of knew like that was part of. There's just part of the if it had been flipped, where it's like, just go build a bunch of trading applications and we'll tell you what the regulatory requirements are. It would have been horrible. It would have been reverse. I would have been like, oh, here comes that regulator, and they're going to, I'm going to have to refactor into all this other fun stuff. So I think just bringing in compliance early, just kind of knowing it a little bit. You could be on the product side of the fence, the development side of the fence. And if that's the space that you're going to operate in, that we want to know that as developers, we want to know that that's the foundation that we have to build on, and it doesn't stifle creativity at all. It doesn't have to be that sort of dread that you hear. Audit, I don't know. Paige, you'll have to sort of speak to that. Hopefully you're helping your customers with that. When they hear audit, they're not running for the hills, right?
Right. Well, we have some really great audit partners, and that's another thing is, when you have a great audit partner and you understand the controls and that they're going to be auditing, and then the process and things like that, communication in not only your personal relationships, but just business in general, really speeds things along. People understand what's expected and the timelines and so on. So that certainly helps. But Brian, I did want to also touch on the fact that, in your past roles, large or small companies, a lot of times, and this is what I'm seeing, is it's the small startups that aren't necessarily, they need the foundation of, I'm not saying, you're a startup, you need to go get your SOC 2, or your startup, you need to get ISO 27001, but you do need a foundation that is, understands like you were saying, Brian, the kind of the lane that you need to operate in when it comes to the protecting the data or whatever the industry that you're in, versus after the fact going and then trying to figure it all out. And I think that maybe more a larger company might have a compliance person or a team or a group or even like a legal team that they can bounce things off of. But when you're a startup, party of 2, party of 10, you do not have that. So if you can actually have a foundation where you're using like a NIST cybersecurity framework where you're at least mapping to a lot of those things, those policies and procedures, it certainly is going to help in the long run.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I kind of lived that one a little bit. And starting a bootstrap company, it was a party of 2 on that one. So we both fit in literally a room. And I was in the financial services space. And I like to consider myself at the time, tenured enough. I'd seen it, sold into the Fortune 50, right? Like, I know this. And there were some things we did right, like bringing that compliance mindset, that security mindset to the foundation of the product. But, you definitely want to leverage partners, I think, at the earliest stage to get a little bit better awareness, because we made mistakes for sure. I mean, we must have had 20 policies that I haphazardly downloaded from all points. I mean, we probably look like the Boeing Corporation with 2 people in the organization, and our business continuity plans, and our partners were kind of looking at it going, I think you should probably check what you're signing up for. And that's where great partners can help you avoid, because it's hard to retrofit things like policy. If I share that with a customer and I say, I'm going to adhere to that policy, but I really don't know what that policy says, I don't know what I'm signing up for. I literally live that experience. And thankfully, my partner says, are you sure that you want to sign up for a tape archival, retrieval, backup? And I'm like, we don't have a tape sit. Oh, it was in that policy that I sent you. I am so sorry. I should have read that. So we all make mistakes, right? And the long and short is, when you start, you engage in partners, you try to do things the right way all the way through. But partners really can help just enable it if you don't have that kind of competency built out in a team. And even if you do, it's great to lean on somebody else to say, can I get an extra set of eyeballs in this? Because this isn't something you mess around with. As a startup, you go the wrong way, and that could be it, right? It's unfortunate, but that could be the end of the line. So you want to take care to not over-engineer it, not over-analyze it, but reach out, have those conversations, have some trusted partners that you can lean on to build a really solid foundation.
Yeah, I remember I'm seeing it was National Cybersecurity Alliance. They had a stat which their research led to 60% of small businesses that have some sort of data breach or cyber incident, they do not make it. Yeah. 60%. So that's huge. So that's why, this, starting just a solid foundation is extremely important, because you don't, Brian, you said it, you just don't know if you're going to make it. If there is a fine or an incident of some sort that you just can't recover from.
Yeah. If you had asked me what the percentage was, I would have probably guessed higher. Actually.
Really? Yeah. I mean, that was last year's stat. Maybe we should go back around and see what the new stat is, but absolutely.
In many respects, there are times when I have a flippancy to my speaking persona that would say, you can't break the rules if you don't know what the rules are, right? Otherwise, you're just being irresponsible. In this space, these rules, these guidelines that we're talking about are the risk mitigation tools that keep you safe so that you aren't part of that 60%. And so while you may not know them and you may not understand all of them, having a system in place like a SecureLabs that has the frameworks built out that can help you make those connection points is so important, because in especially the first years of an emerging business, there's no way you know all of these things. Brian shared with us very specifically, he comes from a very strong background, and even in his experience in the startup time, he made mistakes. So products and services like SecureLabs, like Opsbook, are out there to help growing businesses mitigate the risk and mitigate what they don't know. Fear of the unknown is always the worst thing. And so anytime we can illuminate that and make it easier for a founder and owner to focus on the growth of the business, knowing that they have a layer of protection around them, is so much more impactful. We have gone through this conversation today looking at how compliance can actually be made, it can be very impactful by creating and having operational exercises addressing real scenarios that could occur. We've talked about evidence management and incident response plans. And Paige and Brian have both shared a series of stories from their interactions with their clients and throughout their careers that highlight the need to focus on mitigating risk to our business and ultimately ending up in a place where we're audit ready. And we can take that stress away and leverage that position to actually drive innovation in our businesses. I'd like to thank everybody for participating. I don't see any questions at this moment in time. Brian, Paige, thank you. And your partners, Brandon and Cody, who are out there watching, thank you for being here and supporting the conversation. And everybody else who joined, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you.